Okay, we're back, and we're going to be talking about pelvic types, which we had already started in um, the last voiceover PowerPoint I was giving you. Anyway, to get back to the bony pelvis, we know it has two unique functions and four bones. The functions are to support and protect the pelvic contents, and also to form the relatively fixed axis of the birth passageway. That's a function of the pelvis. There are four bones. The two innominate bones are known as the hip bones, and we have the sacrum and the coccyx, or the tailbone. The pelvis resembles a bowl or a basin. Its sides are the innominate bones, and again, those are the hip bones, and its back is composed of the sacrum and the coccyx. The ischium, ilium, and pubis fuse to form this circular cavity inside this pelvis. The acetabulum, which articulates with the femur. So the ilium, let's talk about that for a minute. The ilium, ischium, and pubis. The ilium is the upper prominence of the hip. It's the large part, looks like a heart. The ischium is the strongest bone. It's on the bottom of the pelvis. The ischium is that very thick, very strong bone that sometimes gets broken in labor and delivery, and that's not a good thing. And then the pubis, all of it, again, forms a circular cavity. The pubis forms slightly bowed front portion of the innominate bone, extending from the acetabulum, which is the point where it articulates with the femur, and the two pubic bones meet to form a joint, the symphysis pubis. And that's a triangular shape that's known as the pubic arch. And I'm going to illustrate this for you in school. It's very hard to see unless you're looking at your book right now. So anyway, just know that the pelvis most of the bones are extremely strong. It resembles a bowl or a basin. Okay, so then to talk about the pelvic types. The gynecoid, again, most common female pelvis, 50% of the women. The android is the one shaped like a heart, only 20% of females, and it does not have the posterior sagittal diameter is too short. It needs to be wider for the baby, most babies to get through. Some can. The anthropoid is 25% of females, less common, and it resembles an anthropoid ape. So you can see the anthropoid is more shaped like the gynecoid, but it still has a very long axis. And then the platypoid is the one that causes the most problems. Only 5% of female pelvises have this. Both anterior and posterior segments in this pelvis are shallow. You can see the transverse diameter is adequate, but not the anterior posterior. And so we have trouble with the pelvic types delivering normally. Okay, now I'm going to talk about female maturation and what happens in normal females. So when we go through puberty, we have I've talked about it over and over, it's neuroendocrine. It starts in the brain. We know the hypothalamus is involved. We know the pituitary is involved. So let's look at this. So through brain maturation, we've got the hypothalamus in the brain. It's triggering our gonadotropin releasing hormone, or GnRH, to the anterior pituitary, and that will activate our FSH and LH. And that's FSH, again, in the recesses of your brain, this should be the follicle stimulating hormone or the luteinizing hormone. So again, we start with the brain. The hypothalamus is going to trigger our GnRH, or gonadotropin releasing hormone, to the anterior pituitary, which is going to activate follicle stimulating hormone, FSH or LH, luteinizing hormone. And it's going from the anterior pituitary, it's going to elicit ovarian activity, which is either going to elicit progesterone and or estrogen. All of this is from the anterior pituitary. And here's another picture if you didn't like those. A brain maturation, somewhere between 10 and 11. We know some people can be much older than that, but that's when it starts to occur. Hypothalamus begins triggering to the anterior pituitary, the GnRH. Anterior pituitary will release our follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which will activate the ovary to release estrogen and progesterone. And remember, progesterone is the hormone of pregnancy. And also, all of this, especially estrogen, will initiate secondary sex characteristics and menses in women. Our pituitary gland anterior is responsible for growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, our adrenocorticotropic hormone, prolactin, which is a very big hormone for breastfeeding. And again, it starts with PR, so don't mix up prolactin with progesterone. Progesterone is for pregnancy, prolactin is for breastfeeding. And there's our luteinizing hormone, LH, and our FSH. The posterior pituitary is responsible for our ADH, or vasopressin, antidiuretic hormone, which I know you remember from patho. If not, go ahead and look it up. It doesn't really matter in pregnancy. It's just normal physiology we're going over here. But oxytocin really, really matters in this area. And it stimulates uterine contractions and also causes a milk ejection reflex. So for appropriate breastfeeding, we also need oxytocin and prolactin. We need both sides of the pituitary. And to get the baby out, oxytocin is the one that stimulates the uterine contractions, and that's the posterior pituitary. So, and just to keep these separate, because some people, believe it or not, get it mixed up, the menstrual cycle occurs in the uterus because it's the endometrium shedding, which is the inner lining of the uterus. The ovarian cycle events are in the ovary. Here, before we go on to this, the ovarian cycle has two phases, the follicular phase and the luteal phase. The follicular phase is where the follicle, we'll go from the follicular phase is day 1 to 14. The follicle matures under the influence of FSH and LH, remember, follicle stimulating hormone, which makes sense because the follicle is forming, and luteinizing hormone until ovulation occurs. So day 1 to day 14. The ovum is usually fertile for about 6 to 24 hours. It reaches the uterus in 72 to 96 hours after it's released from the ovary. The luteal phase then begins when the ovum leaves the follicle and the corpus luteum develops under the influence of LH, or luteinizing hormone. So I'll say that again. The luteal phase begins when the ovum leaves the follicle and the corpus luteum develops under the influence of LH, or luteinizing hormone. The corpus luteum produces high levels of progesterone because it wants to be pregnant, and low levels of estrogen. And again, that's the hormone of pregnancy. So the luteal phase would be 15 to 28 days in a 28-day cycle, day 15 to day 28. Okay, if the ovum is fertilized and implants in the endometrium, the fertilized egg begins to secrete HCG, or what we call human chorionic gonadotropin. Body temperature will go up, usually 0.5 to 1 degree when somebody's ovulating, and remains up until the day before menstruation begins. If fertilization does not occur within about a week after ovulation, the corpus luteum begins to degenerate, eventually becoming a connective tissue scar called the corpus albicans. With degeneration comes a diminished in progesterone and estrogen, and allows for an increase in LH, FSH, which will trigger the hypothalamus. So basically, it's that negative feedback system. The reason the corpus luteum is going to regenerate is because it did not become pregnant. Okay, and looking at this picture, you can see the eggs being released from a mature follicle on the surface of the ovary. The human eggs are produced by follicles, which we just talked about, fluid-filled sacs on the side of the ovary, which around the time of ovulation produce a reddish protrusion seen in the pictures. The egg comes from the end of this, surrounded by a jelly-like substance containing cells. After release, the egg travels down the fallopian tube where it can be fertilized. Okay, so functions of the reproductive system for the male, it's reproductive health, so we are going to talk a little bit about this. You can see the different definitions here. I wanted to, you can go ahead and read those yourself. It's in any anatomy book. I wanted to go ahead and talk about this side where you can see the testes house the seminiferous tubules and the gonads. The Leydig cells, are they on here? I guess we'll go back up here. Oh, there they are. Cells of Leydig under the testes are the main source of testosterone. I wanted to point that out. Leydig, Leydig. The epididymis is the area of maturation. And we can go ahead and look at this. The epididymis is the area of maturation of sperm and reservoir for mature spermatozoa. And then the vas deferens connects the epididymis with the prostate gland and then connects with ducts from the seminal vesicle to become an ejaculatory duct. Copper's glands also, and that's on this one, secrete fluid that neutralizes the acidity of any urine in the urethra prior to the passage of semen to actually protect it. And the scrotum, I think most of us know this. The scrotum, the main purpose of the scrotum, it maintains the testes at a temperature suitable for sperm production. Okay. And then here we are. The testes are what produce sperm and male sex hormones. They are suspended outside the abdominal cavity by the scrotum, a pouch of skin that keeps the testes close or far from the body at an optimal temperature for sperm development. Several 100 million sperm are produced each day. And mature sperm, and broken down a little bit more here, has 3 distinct parts: a head, a middle piece, and a tail. And the mitochondria in the middle piece provide energy for the tail movement. Once the sperm form, they move into the epididymis, which we already talked about, and then go up through the vas deferens into the ejaculatory duct. And then we would be remiss without talking about the penis. It has a long shaft, we know that, and an enlarged tip called the glans penis, which at birth is covered by a layer of skin. It's almost like a hood. Circumcision will negate that and pull it back, and they'll cut it off so that the penis head can be seen. Not everybody has a circumcision. Again, it's another controversial issue in the area of OB, which we will talk about later. But circumcision is the surgical removal of that penis foreskin. Spongy erectile tissue containing distensible blood spaces extends through the shaft of the penis. During arousal, that smooth muscle of incoming arterial walls relax, and the erectile tissue relaxes so that the erectile tissue can fill with blood. The veins that take blood away from the penis are compressed, and the penis becomes erect. And then again, we're going to talk about that neuroendocrine response for the males. We already talked about the females. The hypothalamus has ultimate control over the testes' sexual function because it secretes a hormone. That's where we get our GnRH, or gonadotropin releasing hormone. There are 2 gonadotropic hormones, FSH, which I referred to, follicle stimulating hormone, and our luteinizing hormone, which are present in both males and females. In males, the FSH promotes the production of sperm. LH controls the production of testosterone. And then there it is. Testosterone is the main sex hormone and essential for the normal development and functioning of the male organs. And that's it. So there are 2 sections for this, and hopefully you'll be able to get through it. And so we can start right away with our genetics and conception and our labor and delivery lecture on Monday. And welcome back for your hopefully you had a nice long break. Happy New Year, everyone.